Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you tonight. That's my alarm telling me I have to be online with you now. Okay, that's good. How is everyone doing, first of all? Are we okay?
Tired.
Tired? All right, I'll make it short. I'll keep it short. For sure.
But good.
Yeah, good.
Mhm.
All right. I'd like to hear that. Okay.
The market wasn't that bad, by the way.
The what wasn't bad?
The AFM was not that bad. It was interesting.
Tell me about that. How did that go?
They actually had some pretty good finance panels. I was actually amazed. I think they had more finance panels than I've ever seen before. And a lot of people brought projects that were really good as well.
I'm so glad you're saying that. I think that AFM is one of the better markets to go to simply because the panels, the whole AFM, they do it still at is it the Miramar or the Montage? No, Miramar, is it, no?
I mean, it normally is, but it was all online. It was
Oh
all
yeah, sorry. What am I thinking? Of course, it's online. I love those panels though. I actually go there to just see who's there, who's what's what. Sometimes you just say hi. But I
Yeah.
think they're very informative. They give you a great view of the world as it is right now. And the beautiful thing is that I think it's interesting that people don't really agree with what's going on. So you get a chance of hearing different opinions about a subject matter, and people are not always in line with everything.
Yeah.
And they have reasons for that, which is good.
Yeah. But you had to go into these rooms and sit at the tables before you went into the other rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And while you were there, people would knock on you. You'd hear a knock. And if you opened it up, they would be right there in your face. So no meeting set, nothing. It was just like you didn't know who you were going to meet.
Well, that's kind of fun. It's a little bit like blind dating, huh? Right? It's called speed dating, I think, right?
Yeah, it was a little frightening. So after a while, you just kept your thing off, and then you would go into the group, and then you come back out.
I think that's funny. I think that's great.
It's like that old game Mystery Date that I played as a kid.
Okay. And you like the panels, and you like what was going on in the projects. That was
I think Jonathan was able to bring a lot more people in this year because everybody's in COVID, so everybody's available.
Right.
So I think that's why he stepped it up a little bit. So he can do that every year like this. I'm fine.
He usually has great people. I've done it a few times and I love it. I think he always has very high caliber people from the agents to the bankers to the financiers, distributors, producers, writers, directors, everything.
Yeah.
Great group of people and they're always high caliber. I love these seminars. I think they're fantastic. Even for people that know what they're doing. Even for people that have been doing this for a while. I think it's great for all of us to kind of get a refresher and see, also what other experiences other people have. When we go through production, when we put stuff together and we hit maybe a roadblock with our projects, do other people have are they hitting the same roadblocks? Are they dealing with the same issues? I always find that interesting.
Yeah, it was great. So thank you for recommending, because that was good.
No, I'm glad you got something out of it. I have not done it. Too much going on, but let's see usually I'm there every year. So usually I do AFM every year at time, most of the time. So this year, even though I was online and from my couch, I did not get to do this, but I'm glad you got something out of it. That is good.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's jump into this so I don't take too much of your time. We're going to talk a little bit about two modules. Some of this is going to be familiar. I'm going to sum the stuff up that's familiar just so that you remember the most important things. I don't want to be redundant, but important things are important. I want you to wake up and be able to remember them. We're going to talk a little bit about what terms allow profitability, and that is to do with profitability for what party, because it's different for everyone. It's not the same for everyone. We'll talk a little about the waterfall, which is something you know about the profit police, our collection agent. We talked about free money. I'm just going to go into some specifics. We'll talk about a business plan, and we'll talk about the roles of producers, as there are so many. So let's get going. When we talk about profitability, it really relates to who are we actually talking about? Whose profit is it? What is their agenda? What do they want? And how do they make money? So when we start with the bank, you know what? I'm not even sharing my screen. No one says anything. Okay, I definitely. This is hilarious. I'm thinking, hold on, let me go and get my screen share. This is embarrassing. So share screen. I'm like, no one, they let me ramble on. You don't want to let me ramble on. That makes no sense. I make no sense. Okay, can you see the screen now? Yeah, 9?
Yes.
Good, danke. All right, so here's what I summed up earlier in writing now. You can see it. And here's what I was going to do in sharing with you what I wanted to talk about. So the idea here is to think about what do people want? What do men want? What do people want and how do they make profits? So when we look at a bank, you know, the most important thing for them is there enough collateral available? Are there enough rights available for them to get their bank loan back? That's really the most important aspect they're looking at, not just for pre-sales. Who are the distributors? Are they good distributors? Are they solid distributors? Who's the sales agent? Is that someone who is bankable? And they also want to see how many rights are still available to be sold when you want and agree to a gap loan with them, which is the loan against unsold rights. So they want to make sure that there are enough. Interest and fees is obviously how they make their money. They're driven by the LIBOR rate, which is the general rate, but then they add depending on the risk profile that they assess. And it's different sometimes a little bit from bank to bank or bank-like lender, because there are companies that act like a bank, but they're not a bank. And their interest rates are sometimes higher than a regular bank. But even among the banks, you're going to see slight differences. Not big, but slight. And they vary. So if I give you an interest rate right now, it doesn't mean anything because it might change tomorrow. So it has no point. They don't like taking risks. So for them, it's really essential to look at a project and say, I don't want to read a script. I don't need to know what's going on there. I don't even care who's in it. I just want to make sure that there's enough collateral and there is enough money for me to be made. So the deal has to have a certain size also for them to be interesting to them. So some banks you will find will say to you, you know, we're cash flowing your contracts, but we're not going to do more because the deal might be too small. We're not going to do a gap loan. And they might just look at the contracts and cash flow that. So it really depends on what the deal value is for them. They usually go for short terms, not long terms. So most loans I've ever done on my movies were no more than 2 years in a term. And obviously they don't want you to default. And if you default, they will trigger a takeover clause where they take the movie and fire sell all the rights that are available to sell just so that they can cover their loan. When we jump to the mezzanine lender, it's not dissimilar than the bank in the sense that they also want enough collateral. They're obviously recouping in line after the bank has recouped. So their collateral is only the collateral that's still available after the bank took their collateral. So when I repeat the word collateral, I really just mean distribution rights, because that's what that is. So when the bank takes all the distribution rights and the revenues deriving from the distribution rights to cover the loan, there's hopefully something left. And that is what the mezzanine lender will then tag on and say, okay, this is the collateral that I will have after the bank has recouped their their loan. And they want to make sure that there's enough. They're not looking at it like the bank would in saying, I want to see double the amount of collateral than what I'm lending you. So if they're lending you $1 million as a gap loan, they want to see at least $2 million in unsold rights. The mezzanine lender, as an example, would maybe say, and it really depends on the mezzanine lender, so it's different. But in my case, the most or the mezzanine lenders I have worked with, they want to see 1.5 or 1 coverage. Meaning, if they give me $1 million, they want me to show $1.5 million in available rights to sell, or sometimes even just $1 million, depending on who they are and how risky they are. They then will take the domestic rights as a potential for upside. So they'll do that when they feel that there is a strong domestic component. That's when, you know, they will allow the international rights to be maybe just barely or covering 1-to-1. But in many cases, it's more than that. So it's 1.5. I would estimate when you consider your collateral and how you work with the mezzanine lender, just think about a factor of 1.5 times the amount that they will lend you as the unsold rights you still have to have available. They make money with interest rates, and sometimes they also want a premium, and sometimes they even want a back and profit participation. Mezzanine lenders could theoretically just be investors who don't want to be pushed back and become an equity investor in the end, They want to squeeze in front of the equity investor and call themselves mezzanine lenders. So this could just be an equity investor who says, I'm going to do this deal and I'll give you the money, but I want to have 10% premium. The equity investor gets 20, remember, and I want to have some back-end points. Obviously, that's going to be less than what an equity investor would get, but it would basically look like and feel like an equity investment in front of the equity investment. So they will look at the project and the value, of course, and they also look at a fast recoupment. So the mezzanine loan would not be short like a bank loan would be. So it's not, they're not looking at 2 years. You might look at 5 years, but it's not never ending like you have with your equity investor, where there is no time frame that is considered for the money to be repaid. So let's look at our equity investor. The equity investor is going to look at the collateral and say, is there enough to cover my equity? In many cases, believe it or not, there isn't. I have funded movies where on the international sales estimate side, on the take level, I wasn't covered as an equity investor. And I still financed the movie, and it was based on me thinking and believing that the movie is going to sell strong in the US and I will make my money back out of the US. Many equity investors, at least many I know, would do something similar. In the ideal world, however, you want to show that you can cover at least the investment one-to-one. And in many cases, you won't be able to cover the premium just right there on paper. But if you can cover the investment one-to-one, that's an okay place to be. You want to then suggest a conversation about the domestic strategy, what you're thinking, what you're believing. Obviously, no one's going to give you anything in writing unless, sometimes what I have done is I talked to a major studio and said, I might want to distribute this from international theatrically. Can you give me an analysis of how you feel this kind of movie would do in the theaters? And then sometimes they gave me a breakdown what that would look like and what my revenues could look like. But it's not something that happens a lot. So for the equity investor, you're going to look at a one-to-one collateral in many cases. And of course, the upside has to be strong for the US. The equity investor charges a premium, they charge a back-end participation, that's how they make money. They also make money on the fact that the IP lives with them for the longer time. So if there's remakes, or if there's ancillary rights, or if there's merchandising rights, or if there's other related rights, spin-offs, they will participate in that as well. And that's what I talk about when I mean upside. They will very much look at the cast and the package and the commercial value of something. There are ways to, and when I say advantages in recoupment, there are ways to make an equity investor happy. And here's what I have done, and not many producers do this. But when you are the person that puts together the project, and you're also the person that invests, and then you have to sell the investors that give me money so that I can invest. So I am going to my investors and do simply what you would do. I would go and sell them on this. And what I have done in the past is I have taken the tiny territories like Thailand, Israel is not tiny, but I'm just saying smaller valued territories. And I had a conversation with the bank to exclude them from their collateral. So if I have a strong project that has a strong commercial value where I can take some collateral away from the bank and still be okay on the gap loan, in many cases, or in some cases, you might have more than the 200% that you need for your coverage for a bank available in unsold rights. We had a few cases that we worked on where the unsold rights were very high. And if you would have divided them by 2, you would have had a high loan, but it was over the 20% bracket of your budget. In a situation like that, you can have a conversation with the bank and saying, listen, you have so much collateral. Can I please take some of these territories away from your collateral? And can they be assigned to me in first position? I made up a word for this, which is called ring fencers, because I ring fence them in a little bucket so that they basically are taken away from the bank. Now, if you do that, if you have, let's say you take Thailand out of the pot, for example, and you take out maybe China and you take out maybe Russia. So now you have these 3 territories that the bank will not have anymore to recoup from, and you have them. That means you recoup in first position from them. Then, the bank doesn't, if they give them to you, you own them. I mean, you own them for recoup. So what I have done is I've taken those territories and I've told my equity investors, I will have you recoup in first position on these ring fencing territories. So what happens is when you look at the waterfall, the bank will recoup its loan. And then if Russia comes in early, while the bank is still recouping, I get the money from Russia, even while the bank is still recouping at the same time, because Russia doesn't belong to them anymore. And they gave it to me. So when I have a situation where I like a movie very much and I'm a little thin on the collateral, I try to create ring fences and talk to my bank about excluding some of those territories from their collateral. So that's what I mean by advantages in recoupment. And I don't know if other producers do this, and I don't know if other financiers do this. This is something I've done just to protect our investors a little better. And it's actually, it's actually worked pretty well. I've made I would say, a significant amount back from these little tiny territories. The other thing you need to know, these little tiny territory buyers, they are not as wooed, I should say, at the film festivals often as like the German buyer, the English buyer, the UK buyer who make us all the money. The large buyers make us about 80% of our revenue. So the sales agents always invite them and woo them and this and this. Now, we have done the exact opposite. When we were at Cannes and we were selling these small territories because we sold them ourselves, in many cases, we were wooing our little buyers and we created relationships with them. And they were very happy to we have all this, know early on what kind of movies we will be working on, what we're planning on financing. So you can create a relationship with those buyers who are very grateful to be getting content because they too have, theaters and TV stations that they need to sell content into. And the fact that they're maybe only paying you 0.2% of your budget, could be important for an equity investor who would otherwise never get their hands on that recoupment because that recoupment would go to the bank and they would have to wait in line. So now they get money early on and investors really like that. So when we talk about the tax credit lender, and when I say tax credit lender, I really also mean the subsidy lender or the tax incentive lender, if you want to call it, production incentive. They are looking at the states that they're lending against or the country that they're lending against, if it's an outside country, as someone or as some country or area that needs to be established and not have any big changes. So when you deal with the state like Iowa, we had this example where they have a fantastic tax credit day one and then day two, it's all gone and they have to, the tax credit lender has to sue Iowa to get their money. That's a little shaky. So after these various experiences with various states who have collapsed their programs after a while or ran out of money or changed the law, tax credit lenders know this and they know the track record of these territories and of these states and countries. So they will let you know early on if they are willing to lend against this territory or state. And they will also let you know if it's someone who's a little risky, what the fee would be. And it's likely going to be a higher fee that you have to pay up front if it's a risky or a new credit or a new incentive. They usually are driven by you spending a lot of money in that region because the more money you spend in the region that you're producing and the more money they make. So when you have an estimate where you say, I don't know, just think easy, $10 million budget, and my eligible cost for this $10 million all-in budget might be $5 million, because not everything, as you remember, is eligible as an incentive. Many states do not incentivize above the line cost payments for fees and producers and writers and so forth. So let's say you have eligible cost only 5 million. And in that case, you have it in your budget because your line item exactly what you pay in the region. You do have a contingency in your budget in many cases when you work with the bond company. Now that contingency is not allocated yet because you don't know if you're going to spend it and if you're going to spend it, where you're going to spend it and how you're going to spend it. So if you spend it in the tax credit incentivized region as an eligible expense, that means that the tax credit lender gets more money. In that case, you wouldn't get that money. He gets that money. There's one exception. If the tax credit is given to you by a bank, let's say your bank loan includes a loan for a tax credit, in that case, it would be different because the bank doesn't do that. They basically let you get the extra money if that is the case, if you actually spend more money in the region, they will funnel that back to you. So, and I don't know why the tax credit lenders who are investors don't do this. Who knows? But maybe it's a way for them to A, well, obviously they make more money, but B, maybe it's also a way for them to deal with the risk a little better. The bank has an advantage because the bank also funds against all the other elements that you have, all the other collateral. So it has a little more security than the tax credit lender in case that if something goes south with the tax credit region, it's all in one loan. And they're basically recouping from rights. So if something goes wrong, they take it from somewhere else. So they have a little more cushion, I should say. That's maybe the reason why they would allow whatever you pay in contingency, that it's eligible and given to you by the tax incentive region, obviously given to the bank, to be applicable. Producers, we make money in the budget, of course, but we also make money through back-end participation. Yes, doesn't always happen, let's be honest about that, but it does happen at times. We are usually in our, I would say, overage payments, meaning payments after everyone is repaid, our bank, our mezzanine lender, our equity lender, if and when they are repaid, that's when we continuously receive money. So I have still, it's like a residual basically. I have done movies 20 years ago and I'm still making money on them. So it's kind of nice to have a catalog of movies that you have produced where you later sit in your rocking chair overlooking the ocean, having a Corona and getting a check. There's nothing wrong with that. So we have the option as a producer to have that. And the way to do that is if we stay attached to the IP, and that's why it's very important that we don't have too many people participating in our back end pot, so to speak. But we will always have, in many cases, obviously, we have the equity investor with us in there. And then we obviously have the cast in some cases and the director in some cases in there. So for us, it is really about the upside of the project because we have to deal with all the various investors that we have to pay back on the loan. So we really are driven by how much is the movie making in the US, how much is the movie making over and above our take pricing. So we really are driven by the excess and the overages that are created by a project. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be charging a healthy fee in the budget. We should, and we can. There's nothing wrong with that. But our main, I would say, our long-term revenue, and it is a long-term revenue because you're not going to really see anything, I would say, before 3 to 5 years, honestly. I hate to say it to you, but it's just what the reality is. Because after the runs are done, the first runs are done, the second runs start, that's when monies are coming in for you because everyone else is paid off, hopefully. When we look at a sales agent, how do they make money? Well, they make money not just by charging you obviously a sales fee that is connected directly to the amount of sales they generate for you. So it is in their interest to generate a lot of sales for you and be above the take price, maybe reach the ask price, maybe even get a bidding war going. So they are very much interested, and that is good because this interest aligns with you to make a lot of money, to make a lot of sales. They also get a marketing fee, and that's something that you budget. So they make a little money on that too, because it's a fee that you pay them up front to be able to take your movie to the various film markets. It should be interesting to see how that works online now. Are they charging something now? I should ask. Yeah, because they're not really doing it. I mean, they're not really spending that much money. Who knows? I should have a conversation about that with the sales agent. Right now, we're doing it ourselves, so I haven't really done that lately, but would be interesting to know. It makes, of course, a difference when you have to go to the Cannes Film Festival, you have to travel down there, you have to take a room at the Ritz-Carlton on whatnot. These are real expenses that they have, and they divvy them up between the producers whose projects they're taking with them to the markets. Berlin, Cannes, American film market is fairly easy, but Toronto, wherever they go, it's a little bit of effort and it costs money. So that kind of marketing expense is something that they will charge to you out of the budget and they make a little money there. Distribution expenses, they're supposed to be one-to-one, so I don't think they're going to make a lot of money there. The expenses they have, they charge you for. What they look for is usually a deal that has them attached for longer term. Now, that is not necessarily in your interest. Longer term for them means ongoing revenues for them without, it just kind of goes automatically. So when the first run is done, now they're making money with the second one. When the second run is done, so it kind of keeps going. You want to be able to, if you do a long term, you can, but then include milestones which they have to hit by a certain time, which are related to sales that they have to deliver for you and an amount that translates to for you in a certain period of time. So let's say they have the movie for 6 months, maybe they should get 30% of the take estimates that they have given you to you and earn that for you. Maybe then after a year or two, it should be another amount. So it needs to be ideally going in line with the loans that you have to pay off so that it kind of matches. But when it's a longer term, by which time all your loans are already paid off, you still want to keep those milestones going. Otherwise, you would include a termination saying, if we don't hit the milestones, this is terminated. And an easier way to do it is to keep the term short. When we look at our post-production and in-kind service providers, I really want to point out 2 areas. One is really post-production houses, because as you know, or many of you have seen, there are a lot of post-production houses in the universe. And their way of attaching the project to their house is by making an incentive for you, making it interesting for you. And the way they make it interesting for someone who puts a project together is by saying to them, you do not have to pay me. I think that's very interesting, seriously. Anyway, or you don't have to pay me everything up front. So they will incentivize you by saying, we're going to do a deal where we are deferring 50% of our post-production cost to be repaid after the movie is finished. Many post-production houses do this, so you don't have to be shy to ask for that. They will make money on this. Not only will they charge you a little more than what the usual rate would be, so you pay a little bit of a premium there, to be honest, and you also are going to pay a little bit of the premium on the portion that they are deferring, because obviously they want to make money on the money that they're deferring, because now they're taking risk like an investor would. So you can estimate about 10% to be paying on what the deferment amount would be. You would have the advantage of creating a relationship with a post-production house where you can do the same deal over and over and over and over, which makes it easier for the bond company because they know, aha, this is where you're going. It makes it easier for the bond company to approve these deferment deals because they have to approve them. And it kind of creates a little flow for you that you automatically know with every project, I have somewhere where I can go and have a house, like a post house where I can work with, because it doesn't really matter where you shoot, you can post wherever you want to post. Now, if you're post producing in an area where you want to create high incentives, you might have to change that. You might want to go where you have the incentive, and sometimes it's obviously also driven by what the director wants. But nowadays everything is online. Director can give responses to edits from his couch. So it's not so much that we all have to be sitting in an edit suite to give notes anymore. And people still do that sometimes, but it's not absolutely necessary. We talked about music investments. The idea for a music investor is to put as much original music into your project as possible, because they only make money on the new original music that they have created with you, for you. So original sound, original scoring, original songs, that is what they make their money with. And the more music you apply, the more money they'll make. So when we look at profit definitions, it's in essence, it's pretty simple. It's basically all revenues minus all expenses, and it's profits. Now, what are these expenses? We want to define them in every contract we do. We want to be very specific on how we define them. So the negative cost, as they're often referred to as the production cost, is the bonded production budget. The expenses include everything from P&A, prints and advertising money, to distribution fees, not just to the studios and the sales agents, but also to the exhibitors, all the sales fees and expenses, collection agency fees and costs, the bank loan, the investments, premium, etc. So there are niches to this that you want to be aware of. And it is always a good idea, when you know what those are, to mention them in any contract that you have. Or say, I want to cap it to these elements. So when you cap an expense to be deducted from your earnings, you also want to be very specific what they are. These are just some expenses that you should definitely mention in any agreement that you do to make sure that people don't deduct anything that they're not supposed to be deducting. And vague language is usually where the devil is in the detail and where it gets tricky when it comes to expenses that are being allowed to be deducted, because they will reduce your profit. You want to be able to use caps wherever you can. So when you have distribution costs, for example, or expenses, let's say, there is a possibility to say, dear sales agent, I will pay your distribution expenses, but I will only pay them up to this amount. So it's not a percentage, but it's actually an amount. So you agree to an amount up to which you pay. So if they take on the movie for 20 years and they hit that number, they hit that cap number, it's on them. Whenever you can define a cap, like an actual amount to an expense, it is to your advantage. So that's something to remember. We talked about the waterfall a little bit in the past modules. We know that the parties in a collection agent management agreement mostly include the producers, some crew, talent, service providers who are deferring their fees or receiving a profit participation. You have the guilds in there if you are a guild production. You will obviously have your investors and financiers in there. You have your banks in there as well, unless they are recouping outside of the collection management account. The bond company will be a party, and of course, sales agent and distributors will be a party. And the reason why they all are a party to this one agreement is so that we can see in the end everything fits together and all the waterfall mechanisms fit and all the terms fit. So they basically at that point see what everyone else makes and what they do. There is something called an instruction letter for cast. Sometimes people prefer that talent is going to be handled in a separate document because not everyone wants to know or wants other parties to know what kind of perks these actors are getting, what the deal in detail is, because there are silly things in there. As in, I want to get my mistress flown in at least twice a week. I mean, there is, of course, it's not that detailed, but I'm saying there are things in there that maybe talent doesn't really have shared with a third party. So there are what is called instruction letters that will go with the collection agreement that will only be signed by you and the actor in that case. But there's still the actor and the company will still be part in general of the comma agreement and will be participating in profit if that is what they do. Now, if they have a fee that they're deferring, or if they have some box office revenues that they're participating in, that will also be part of the collection agreement. When we talked about waterfall, we defined that the waterfall is nothing else but a log, a register that tells us who gets paid when, from what, and what are they getting paid for a service or a repayment. So the waterfall designs is very clearly showing us where we are at any given time when revenues come in. So it shows us exactly where are we in 3 months, how much money do we still have to make to pay the bank, and then it shows in 6 months how much money have we paid the bank yet. It shows us in a year the bank is hopefully paid. So now we're starting to pay our equity investor or our mezzanine lender. So it shows us at any given time where we are. This is the nice thing about our collection agency report, because it kind of reflects your waterfall at any given time. And it basically repeats every time you get a report. And it's usually about every 3 months as you go on average, where you see exactly who got what and how much money they made. Investors like this because it is very transparent. So it's definitely something you can mention to them. I call this a path to profit because there are many paths to profit. So this is just one of them. And even when we go through this one, you're going to see it's going to be moving around a little bit. But we haven't gone too deep yet in our cases in relation to movies that are actually going to be theatrically released. When you have a movie that's theatrically released, you have a portion of your waterfall happening from the US that's dealt with a little different than your usual international sales waterfall that you've used to and that you've seen so far. So as we dive into box office revenues, we need to figure out what does that mean? Where do they go? Who gets paid what and why? When box office revenues in the US are generated, there is always a deal between the studio that releases the film and the exhibitor, who is the theater owner. And they have what is called a split. And it really depends on the deal that the studio made with the exhibitor, what that split is. As a producer, we have no say in this. This is really just between the studio and the exhibitor. Now, if we, however, do a rent a studio deal, or let's say we do a self-releasing deal, for walling, you name it, any form of self-releasing, then we become basically the studio. And we then have a conversation with the exhibitor what the split should be for the box office revenues. How much of the box office ticket do I get as a producer, and how much do you get as the exhibitor? Now, we talk about a general situation with the studio. You can see anywhere from 30 to 50% going to the exhibitor and the rest going to the domestic studio. The domestic studio then, or anyone who gets the other part, it could be you, would apply cost. And in this case, we would apply P&A financing fees, and anything that's related to the print and advertising campaign that we have done to release the movie in the United States. That would be deducted here. And then any kind of minimum guarantees that we maybe have received from the studio. So if the studio takes the movie out and has paid us $2 million as a minimum guarantee, they will charge this now. Now this is the time that they will get this paid back. And then whatever is paid, whatever is left after we paid all this goes into the collection account. Now, the foreign side, you see here, the foreign revenues, all the distributors pay into the collection account. And we have at this moment here, the guilds very, very early on here. Now, as I mentioned before, I think the guilds is always a conversation. I have had situations where they got paid later. They got paid after the bank got paid in many cases, and sometimes even after investors got paid. So there is movement there, and don't ask me why that happens, but it happens. The collection agent would then pay the sales fee to the sales agent next, and also, of course, first the collection agency fee. Now, when you have a bank in your deal, there are many banks that require that the sales agent does not charge anything until the bank has recouped. So there is a situation, and it's not rare really, that the sales agent is asked to defer all their fees, every single penny, until you paid off the bank loan. And they do that because they know otherwise there is no movie to be sold. But they wait. They basically wait until the bank is ready to say, okay, we're paid off. And in many cases, you don't have to do that. In many cases, the bank say, okay, fine, well, the sales agent can charge the fee. It really depends on the conversation that we have with our lenders. We go down and we pay our bank, we pay our mezzanine lender next with the premium, we'll pay the equity with the principal and the premium, and then we pay the deferment. Sometimes deferments go before the equity because they are considered production costs. When I do a deal with equity investors, when I'm not the equity investor, someone else is the equity investor, I usually insist as a producer on the production cost having to be paid before I pay my investors back. And deferments are nothing else than production costs that are paid later. That's all they are, but they're still production costs. And that's an argument that I usually win by saying they are deferring their fees, but they need to be paid now because now we're making money. So after all these costs are paid, you get to the profit participation level where then everyone gets paid at the same time in accordance with the percentage of the profits that they are receiving. Again, collection agents receive all the revenues, they pay all the expenses, they pay out per the comma, which everyone is a party to, and they provide reports to you, and they provide full transparency to all the parties involved in the production. It includes the talents, the guilds, producers, distributors, financier, and so forth. So there isn't really a way for anyone to do creative accounting with this, certainly not the producer or the sales agent, because we don't even get our hands on the money. So it's all handled by the collection agent. We haven't really talked about slate financing, and I'd like to touch on this because people hear about this a lot, and it does happen. That slate financing basically means you have a production company and you are raising funds to not just do one project, but you want to put together like a development slate, and you want to raise money for more projects. In general, it's a good idea because what you do is you create diversification for your investor by saying, listen, you don't just give me money for one movie, but I'm actually doing these other things as well. And there are different budget ranges, and there might be, there is maybe a bigger movie, then there's a smaller movie, and maybe there is a TV show, or maybe there is something else. So you give them different kind of product, if that's what you're producing, and then they invest in the different levels of your production. So the good thing about doing a slate of projects and creating a business plan that reflects that and the different levels of how a strong project can lift up something that might tank. And that's usually what, studios, what they do is they make all these movies, and there are movies that tank, and there are movies that are better and lift up the other ones, or wipe out the deficit that they had with movies that didn't perform. This is not dissimilar to that. You're basically creating a little slate that gives you the option to, lift up something that didn't turn out the way you want to. You would obviously diversify. You would mix genre and budgets. That means you're not doing 15 romantic comedies at $20 million. You could, but in the ideal world, you want to do maybe a romantic comedy, and maybe you do a small elevated horror movie that's a lower budget, and maybe you think about maybe even doing a television series that is not super expensive to start with, but something that kind of diversifies your genre and the product that you're doing. You can obviously get better distribution and production terms, not just with financiers, but in general, because you're creating with everyone really, you're creating a flow of product. Whenever a production company creates a flow of product that has a certain taste, like when you see something that's produced by Working Title, I mean, you already know Working Title is great. They do fantastic romantic comedies. You're going to love, it's going to be some weird English thing, and it's going to be fun to watch. You kind of know. So when you are a production company that creates content that has a certain quality, then you create relationships that you can use over and over and over because they know what you're delivering. So this is the advantage of doing slates. And obviously, when you do more than just one project, the finance terms and many costs are reduced because you do more than normal. So it's like with anything, a quantity gets you cheaper deals. Now, here's something you need to think about when you actually physically doing this. Imagine you have 3 movies, just for the sake of argument, and they're all, one is a thriller, one is a comedy, and one is maybe a horror movie, right? And you're casting them parallel. You're saying, okay, investor, you're going to give me $10 million to do these 3 movies. And here's who is going to be in this movie, here's who's going to be in that movie, here's who's going to be cast in that movie. So you have your cast envisioned. So now you start packaging. And for whatever reason, you can't really get the package done in the time that you said you would be producing these movies. So all of a sudden, the first movie goes, but the second movie, the cast is, not getting on, or the director is being an idiot or something, or the cast is not available. Whatever it might be, you can't get your talent attached, or it drags out. Let me put it that way. Because all these films together are framed in a period of time where they want to be made, they kind of have to be made at the same time. You can, of course, allow, let's say you do a deal with an investor and say, I'm going to have 2 years to make these 3 movies. Give me 2 years to make those, and here's where I'm going to do them. That's fine, but it can still happen that maybe even an actor falls out, something happens, and all of a sudden the actor is gone. The juggling of that process can sometimes be headachy. And here is why that becomes a problem. When you have a slate and you go to a slate financier, and that, let's say it's an investment firm, for example, and they do a deal with you and say, yeah, we're going to give you a loan of $10 million for this, and we're going to start the loan on January 1st, 2021. And you need to be spending that money immediately, or they tell you, we'll give you this portion and you need to spend this. Worst case scenario is they say, we'll give you $10 million on January 1, now go spend it. What happens is the interest clock and the payment clock starts ticking January 1st. So while you're putting everything together, and if it takes longer, you now have to think about, I'm having to pay all this interest back. I have to pay this money back. And the longer it takes you to make this movie, the more interest, or these movies, the more interest you generate. There's another thing. If you wait too long to take the money out of the account to make the movie, you pay sometimes what is called unused commitment fees, meaning the capital is sitting there, $10 million to make your 3 movies, but you're not using it because you're not ready to shoot. So because you're not using it, they're actually charging you for not using it. So you could theoretically pay money for money you haven't even used. It's a little tricky. So when you do a slate, you kind of put that together early on and know that I need to give myself enough time to get these people attached, and I know they're ready to go because they already know about the project, and you have to kind of balance out the timing. I've done this, and I can tell you it was pretty headachy. I always did slate of 3, just 3. Sounds so simple, but it wasn't, and I had to really push hard to get these movies done within a certain time frame in order to generate and use the money. So it is something to be careful about. The other thing you're dealing with as a con is that when you do your pre-sales on these movies, let's say movie A sells very well, movie C, you need time to get the cast on, movie B is kind of in the middle. You deal with the fact that you have generated pre-sales for the first movie and the last one is still not ready. So you now have to figure out, what am I going to do with these pre-sales? If you do pre-sales for a movie and the cast changes, if you do pre-sales for a movie where all of a sudden there is a delay, these pre-sales, they will be with you for a certain amount of time, but they won't be with you forever. So it could be that if you lose an actor or something changes in your package, that you lose these pre-sales, then you have to start all over again. Many times what I've seen is that when people do slate deals, they rush when it comes to developing the script because they know we have to get done, we have to get shooting, we know we don't have time for this. So whenever you're under a time pressure and you haven't really finished the development, you usually have a situation where the quality suffers a little, because it all starts with the story, as we know, and you do need to take the time to develop the story properly. All the cons said, I still would say if you can put together a little business plan for a production company that you're creating and not just do one-offs, and you do a mix of content that can be done in a certain amount of time because you control the aspects, I would say that's a good thing to do. Investors actually like this. And let's talk about the business plan. I don't know if you guys already started with your projects, but the business plan for a movie is not dissimilar than the business plan for any business. I mean, what would you do? You open a business. Okay, fine. What do you want to figure out? You figure out your competition. You figure out how much money you need. You figure out who you want to sell to, our audience in this case. You figure out what market is this for. It's like with any other business you would be doing. You figure out your distribution path. You talk about where you want to shoot in order to save money. You think about what kind of established producers you could attach to help you in certain ways where you need maybe elevation or you need a door opened. You obviously have to think about what kind of vision you have for the project. You know, is it something like something, or, you know, how do you want to be different? How do you want to be standing out as a producer? You will talk about that relevancy of the story today. That's something you will talk about in your vision. And when you pitch these things, you usually don't have much time. These pitch meetings are short and you have to kind of get the attention span of someone pretty quickly because they hear so many stories and they hear it all the time. It's good to research your pitch decks. It's good to research the presentation of your business plan. Rehearse is what I wanted to say. Sorry about that. And get some feedback from some people. And ideally people that not necessarily know much about the industry, because you want to have this project presented as if it's a business. You want to not necessarily always hear from people that know the industry. You do also want to talk to people that know the industry because you want to make sure that you can make changes that make sense for your project, but it can't be people that are your friends. So you need to find maybe neutral parties that would listen to your pitch and give you some feedback. When you develop, you're going to have to spend some money. That's where you show skin in the game. So it's not done with, I'm paying an option fee for a script and now I go make it happen. It's an option fee for a script. It's the writer that needs to do rewrites. It's maybe some location scouting. Maybe we have to hire a showrunner because we need someone and need to pay them a development fee. Maybe we have to hire a director and need to pay them a development fee. Maybe we have to hire the executive producer that who we want to use to open doors and have to pay them a retainer. There's always monies that you have to expect to pay in order to get your project to a certain place. And then when you have it at a certain place, that an investor can come in and back you up further by giving you backing for offers and helping you in doing, you know, maybe location scouts, maybe hiring a line producer, those kind of things. You just have to be aware how much money you would have to spend in order to get a project there. And you can't really expect just to go with the script under your arm to some heavy hitting producer and say, here, go do this for me or tell me how it works. It doesn't work. People want to see that you actually did some work and did some research and have your own skin in the game, has spent your own money to get the project to a place where it's worth their time. And their time means the time of an investor and the time of a producer that you want to attach. Here are some more details regarding the business plan elements that you should be thinking about when you put together a business plan. Obviously, you want to be in the mood of the content. So when you do a horror movie, your visuals should reflect kind of where you're going with this. Is this kind of a bloody slasher movie, or is it kind of an elevated psychological horror movie? Whatever mood you want to transpire, the colors you want to use, the colors you see your project in being shot, that's the visuals and that's the images you want to choose. You want to have a summary. You want to talk about your lead characters and their twists and turns in the story. You want to talk about what's unique about your project. Why is it different? What's so special about it? Obviously, the genre, the target audience, and the marketplace you want to enter into needs to be addressed. You want to have your sales estimates in there. Your budget top sheet should be in there. And if you can, to get a sales agent opinion letter, you can put that in. I have sometimes seen that, and I thought it was a great idea. I've never done it myself, honestly, but when a sales agent writes why they think they can sell this, why they think it's unique, it's a third party that is actually responsible in selling this, telling an investor, here's why we also think it's the best thing after sliced bread, and not just the producer thinks it's the best thing after sliced bread. So it's something nice to have. The marketing plan should be in there. How do you want to create awareness for this project? What kind of branding corporations do you want to enter into in order to elevate the awareness, to let people know about your project? What kind of finance trends are you thinking about? What is the ROI for the investor? Are the risks mitigated? Are they identified and mitigated? How do you want to mitigate them? What are they? We need to talk about that. How do you align your interests with the investor, and why is it aligned? We want to talk about that a little bit. Obviously, producers and directors' vision. And you have, of course, the bios from the leading team members, and you don't have to have a page per person, just sum up the bios of the leading people that you have. When you have producers that have names and track records, you want to put in them, obviously, the cast, director. When you have crew that is specific to your project, that's essential. For example, if you do a drama that's a period piece, you want to have a costume designer and a set designer who have done this before, ideally something that is known. Those kind of things you need to think about in your crew. You want to work with people that have a certain track record to elevate the project and to elevate what it can be. The chain of title is always a good idea to be put in there, and it probably is enough to do this as an exhibit to add it later on. And if you have a sizzle reel and a mood reel or a website, you can add information about that too. You don't need to do that. I like to see the websites of projects that are being developed, but it's not necessary, because sometimes you don't want people to know about it too early. You don't want a website and someone says, oh, that's great, that's a great idea, I'm doing a version of this. So it's not necessary. But if you have a little sizzle that is like a tantalizing kind of mood sizzle, often done for psychological thrillers or horror movies, especially when there is not expensive cast involved, you can actually do something like that and shoot something like that. When you, sorry about it. When you, hold on, uno momento, where are we? Here we go. Setting up when you reach out for investors. When you start your production or your project, you put together a production LLC. I mean, I do LLC, people do other company versions as well, but I like LLCs because they're easy to transfer membership interests to an investor or to anyone else who wants to be, who is a part of the IP. So LLCs are pretty easy to set up. You can do it online. It's not complicated. It doesn't cost that much money if you do it yourself. You can obviously have lawyers do it and then it costs more money, but you don't really need to. I use an agency that's called Ink Smart. They do it online. It's $149 and it's easy. And you get the paperwork literally within a few days, maximum a week, depending on where you're incorporating the LLC. The SPV is what this is called, single purpose vehicle, as I call it, is the entity that would hold the rights. So this is where when you do an option agreement, me, Jeanette, does an option agreement with Joe Schmo, the writer. I then transfer, Jeanette, transfers those rights to the production company, Joe Schmo Movie, or me, Jeanette Movie, or whatever the movie title is, for the single company. You do want to transfer those rights in there, and then this company that you have created, the LLC, production LLC, would be the entity that enters into all the agreements that are related to the company and to the production. So it's not you personally entering into any agreements, it's your LLC that enters into all the agreements. I'm sure you've heard about PPN, is product placement memorandums. I think it's a short form for it. Often used in the US. I've seen many of them, I've never used them. They're basically boilerplate, huge documents. They are regulated by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and you can best inform yourself of what a PPM is, how it's structured, by going on the website of the SEC or talking to a lawyer about what a PPM entails. In normal cases, it's basically a description of the offering. It's a description of what you would offer to an investor. It says in very regulated words, it's not very creative because it's really boilerplate, because it has to be. It's so legally regulated that it can't have any kind of fun things in it, as I call it. So, but investors are used to seeing these documents. So they understand this is a boring document. They just go to the essence of the deal and then they understand what the deal is. But it is an offering that's a private offering that goes to investors that have to be, in many cases, accredited. And what that means is that they have to have a certain income that makes them accredited. And what an accredited investor is sometimes changes a little bit depending on what the SEC regulates. I think right now it's anyone who is above, I want to say $1 million in net profits. I'm not even sure. But there are accredited investors that you can approach. Now, you cannot just take this PPM and send it around. It would have to be handled through a investment company or a broker who is allowed to do this. It's not something where, or you go to an accredited investor who is absolutely accredited, then you can hand it to him. But in many cases, it's broker firms, investment firms that handle these offerings for you and would put them together for you. So it's something that you can certainly look into. Because investors are used to seeing this, but it is something I would always advise you to do with someone who knows how to put these together. It's not something that you can just write yourself or, figure out on the whim. There are investment offices that I've worked with that are called alternative investment offices. And alternative doesn't mean, they're alternative. It just means that the investment group we're in as film and content providers is called an alternative investment in their wording, in their coding. So these investment firms do put money into diverse situations, and some of them is alternative investments, which entertainment belongs to. So smaller investment firms often do this, and there are many online that you can research, basically just research and contact to see if they do film and television, what they want to see in order to be of help for you. I have done a deal with an investment firm in New York recently. And it basically went down where I put together my slate business plan for them. I ran all the numbers, did all my estimates, did the ROIs, did the IRRs, which is, internal rate of return. It's always something they want to see. It's a formula that is applicable to them. It means something to them. Anyway, so I did all this. And then they said, okay, we're going to take this out for you. And they, of course, helped put it all together. We're going to take it out for you to our investors. And what happens next is that I'm on the phone with these investors that they're picking out for me to talk to them about the information that I have prepared. So they look at the information, they look at my business plan, and then they ask me questions. And I better have good answers for them. So that's similar to what would happen to you, where when you work with a company like this, they do the paperwork, they create these offerings, they create a data room where all the information is included that you bring together for the projects that you're working on. and anything that an investor would want to see. And then they'll set up calls with you and people that actually look at this information. And then, sorry, my phone, I should turn this off. Sorry about that. And they will then decide if it's of interest to them or not. I always like, well, there are online investor portals. I've not really done that. So that's, you know, there are places where you can go online, and I've seen this for movies actually, where you can list your movie and then investors can bid for it or can invest in it. I've never seen this work for my projects, but they do exist, so I want to mention them. I've no idea how they work, honestly, but I think it's worth trying and looking and seeing if you have a project, if they would take it on and what it would entail and who would respond. I don't know anyone who's ever made money through an online investor portal, so I can't say it works, but it is a possibility. I really like relationships. To me, most of the movies that I've made, and as you know, I came from a different country. I came from a small town. I didn't know anyone when I came to Hollywood. I really started from scratch, and I can tell you that relationships that you make as you grow and put your projects together, they're just essential. And having people have you open doors for a project that they really like, that they really think should be made, is something that absolutely happens. It happened to me, and I'm not someone who knows more than most people. I just don't. I do what I think is right, and I do what I think is logical because I'm German. That's how it works. But I do work my ass off, excuse my French, to make sure my project is perfect before I send it to anyone. I really do. I work very hard to make sure that the Bible works. If it's a TV show, I work very hard to make sure that the script is absolutely the best it can be. I take my time, and I really think these things through regarding cast, director, producers that I want to work with, who I want to, how I want to shoot, where I want to shoot, why I want to shoot, where I want to shoot, what my finest bit is. I think this all through to the T, so that I have something to present that tells people I thought this through. And this is how you need to be when you put something together. I cannot tell you how many times I get phone calls from people. I have a script. What do you think? And I give them feedback because that's okay. But don't, when someone says to me, I have a script, can you get me money for this? I would have to say no, because you haven't really done your homework. Give me a proper business plan. Think it through. Show me your path. Show me how you want to see this done. Show me the path that you want to go. Show me what you think, how much money you can make with this. Can I do that for them? Yes, but do I want to spend the time on this? Only if it's a really damn good project. And when I say it like this is for many executive producers exactly the same. So it is important to think about what you want to give to someone at what time. We talked about brand integration before, and the only thing I'm going to say here again is it's not about your project. Absolutely not. It's about the brand, and if your project fits into what they're doing right now and what they want to focus on in the next year. You don't know what that is until you talk to them. And you don't even know if your project has any value to them until you talk to them. And you'll be surprised when they say, yeah, we see value, but here's what we want to see. And here's how we want you to change the story. And here's how we want to see our brand incorporated. So when you talk to a brand, really ask the question, what can I do for you that elevates your brand and your product in a way that benefits you? What can I do for you? That's really the question. It's not about how much money do you want to give me to sponsor my project. That's not how that works. So thinking for them is essential for you to attach any brand. That's really just all you need to know. And we already talked about brand integration, so we don't need to go into deeper things. Tax incentives, we talked about that too. I just want to remind you that every state is different and changing all the time. They change what they pay money for, they change what is eligible, they change how much money they have left to spend, they change the rules constantly. Your job is to research what's going on there at any given time that you are thinking of shooting there. And it might change, and they might just be out of money by the time you get there. So it is really essential for you to do your research. And as I mentioned before, Entertainment Partners has this amazing website that is always updated and always shows you where the rules have changed and what's going on and what legislation. It's a little different when it comes to international subsidies. And for some reason, those are fairly robust. So when you talk about subsidies in Germany, or when you talk about subsidies in Canada, and when I talk about that, it's really driven by the content. Those have been in place for many, 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 many years, and they're not going anywhere because they are designed to support local filmmakers. What that means for you as an American filmmaker is you have to combine forces with a local filmmaker, and you have to think about your content being beneficial to the local region. So it's not just about, I'm taking my movie, I'm shooting it in Germany, and I get 20% of the subsidies, which you can do, and you get 20%. But why would you schlep all the way to Germany to get 20%? You can get that here. There's no point. What you want to do in that situation is you want to think about a subject matter that might be interesting to the German subsidy boards that give you more than the 20% because they exist. There are lenders in Germany and France and Spain and certain countries that add to the tax credit that exists. You have heard about Canadian content. When you produce something in Canadian content version where the Canadian actor is applicable, if you have a Canadian director, you might have a Canadian producer as a co-producing partner and you shoot in Canada. Those things are essential. In France, it's the same thing. If you shoot something in France, you have to have a French creative component. Maybe the writer is French, maybe the director is French, maybe you have some French cast, or European cast also counts in these European nationality countries. But what you want to do is you want to think about, what can I do that has to do with that culture? So in Germany, it's about making something that they're either totally hot to do, like it's a, Tarantino comes to do a movie, of course they say yes, and where can we roll out the red carpet? But for us normal people, like we're not Tarantino just yet, we have to think about how can we talk to these committees that give the extra monies to us in a way that they see this as a beneficial project for them. And that has to then do with the subject matter that is culturally colored, and it has to do with you creating benefit for the region that you're shooting in. So in those kind of situations, you can get actually up to 50% of the budget if you do it right. So it's definitely worth looking into. And the best part is, this money does not have to be cash flowed by a lender, because what happens in Europe in many jurisdictions is that they cash flow you in accordance with a production cash flow plan. So you don't need anyone to cash flow this. That's an advantage. And it's also very, as I said, very robust. Crowdfunding, crowdsourcing is something I would say is definitely applicable more for smaller budgets. I've not seen this really work for budgets over $3 million, let's say, or maybe that's already high. I would always say, if you know how to do a crowdfunding campaign, that's great. I have no idea how to do this. I would literally hire someone to do this for me, because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of detail that goes into it. And there are actually companies that do a really good job in doing this. So I would say combining forces with someone that has done this before, it might not be the worst idea, and someone to place the project in a way on the crowdfunding platform that it has immediate attention would make sense. Because so many people go on these crowd platforms, and how do they get discovered? It's, there's so much product on there. So there is a little bit of algorithm work to be done probably as well that might help when it's done by someone who actually does this for a living. Crowdsourcing is a little different because you're not getting cash here, you're getting services. And there are many people on, I'll make an example here, Stage 32, where they would work on your project for a lower rate or no money to get a credit, or to get to elevate their career. They get a credit they haven't done before. Maybe it's a UPM. He now wants to be a line producer, wants to have a line producer credit, does line producing work. That works. Or it's a coordinator who now wants to be a UPM. Something like that could work. So it's more in exchange of services than money. Music investment, we talked about. The way that the music investor works is basically by taking your music, receiving the royalty payments for the music. And for you, that means you have to talk to them about how much music you want to use in your, I don't know why this is still doing this. Go away now. Sorry about that. How much music you want to use in your production. They do also pay for sync rights. So let's say you want to get a song that is known in your movie, because many people do. They have very known songs in their movies. They pay for that as well. So you don't just have to think about, I need to create all this original music for them to make money, for them to be worth their while investing into my movie. You can think about, okay, I want to do a mixture of original songs, original scoring, but I also want to license music that is known So that conversation can definitely be had, and music investment companies do know that, and they will support you when it comes to that. We know what in-kind services are. We've talked about this many times. It is important for you to remember that in-kind services are ideally used when you don't have enough money to fund your production. That's when you start looking into deferments and moving monies into the recoupment schedule. It is something that you do when your equity is low, or when you want to make your finance plan very attractive. It's definitely something to look into early on, but it's not necessarily always applicable if you don't have, if you have enough equity. I'd like to talk about the different rules of producers. We do have different producers. We have producers, we have co-producers, we have executive producers, we have co-executive producers, we have supervising producers, we have line producers, we have associate producers, we have creative producers. All these we do. I'm going to talk quickly about them. Just the vast application of credit from anywhere to someone who actually earns it and goes by the code that the Producers Guild publishes. That's perfect. To, I want to have my girlfriend get credit and I'm the investor and I just want it because I can. I mean, it's that wide and happens all the time. So it's really important for you to know when you get into a situation where someone weird asks you for a credit, to know what kind of credit you can give them, number one, because you need to understand the value of the credit and what their credit usually stands for in order to be able to do that. And you also want to be cognizant about what the Producers Guild dictates, so you don't, early on screw up your relationship with the Producers Guild. You don't want to do that. So a producer in general, if you go by what the Producers Guild wants, is something you can read in the Producer Code of Credits on their website. Okay, read that, it helps. In many cases, it's the person that owns and controls the rights of a project, drives the project regarding development, financing, production, distribution, and is the party that is most responsible for anything that happens and is most connected to all the agreements that apply. So it's the driving force that controls the IP. That's what a producer usually is in film. In television, it's a little different sometimes, because in television, I've seen producers working under the executive producer, who is a higher level credit in the world of television. In the movie world, it's actually the producer that has a higher level credit, interestingly enough. So it's a little swapped around. Now, in addition to the above that we just mentioned, producers can also be, producer credits can also be given to people who just do certain things. For example, it could be that you develop a script that you really love, but you have no cast relationships, right? And now you meet this person who happens to be friends with the cast that you want. It's just a stupid coincidence. But they do know a little bit about, the value of their services if they would be giving you access to this person, and this person would actually attach. I have seen situations where in a case like that, where valuable cast was attached to a project that a producer was controlling, that person who made the valuable cast attachment possible would also have a producing credit. It happens. Cast attachments is a very high level value to everyone. And that's why that's something where you can say, all right, because you give me this, that it elevates my project and I'm having the project, maybe we combine forces and we're both producers. So that's something you can think about. This is the worst case scenario. You do want to try not to give producer credits right away. It's the last credit you want to give to anyone. You really want to give that clean producer credit to no one other than people that actually drive and own the project. So don't be generous with this. I'm just giving you an example of what could happen and what I have seen. But that means for you, give other credits. Don't give producer credits in film. Television is different, but in film, be really, really, really stingy with the producer credit. So when you have someone who sources funding, it's another thing that actually really elevates your project, right? If you come to me with a script and I love the script and I give you money and I know I'm going to have to be involved in the production because I am responsible for the money, I will become a producer. There was no conversation about it because I'm reliable for this money and I'll be driving this with you. And in most cases, if it's someone that just starts out, I'll probably be taking it over because I'm responsible for the money. But not everyone is like me, because not everyone is also involved in the physical production or the development of something. It might just be someone who really just knows someone with money or has money himself or herself. they could ask for a producer credit. Again, your job would be to push them into the executive producer or the co-executive producer realm, but it could happen that someone like that will ask for a producer credit. You have situations where sometimes people who manage distribution aspects will ask for a producer credit. You definitely I mean, when you develop a project and you have a studio pick it up, you obviously have a producer credit because you started with the project and you developed it. So that's something that you can look at. There is also combinations of these that will apply. So, you know, someone who brings money and cast, someone who brings distribution and money, someone who brings money and distribution, something. So combinations apply. Now here's what we talk about when we talk about a co-producer. A co-producer is someone who also does the work with you, but is not as much in the driver's seat than you when you own a project and control the development and the financing and distribution aspects. They can bring things to the table that will elevate your project, but they're not necessarily the ones responsible for anything that happens. That could be a co-producer. It's basically like a partner with you, a partner in crime. So when you have an IP that you share, let's say you have a situation where someone who wrote a book and it's a famous book and you want to make a movie out of the book and you don't want to pay $500,000 for the IP, right? You can make this person a co-producer and their contribution will be the rights to the book to be made into a movie. So that's a scenario I have seen and that actually does work and that is applicable. You also will find that when you produce a movie that you are going to thinking of shooting in France or in Germany or in any country where you need a local co-producer, that person is actually called a co-producer. And they will, in many cases, own the rights with you because they have to in order to get you the subsidy financing. So a co-producer is always applicable in a case where you shoot in a subsidy-driven region where you as an American would not have access to money. And that person is actually called a co-producer and would own the rights with you. We have other situations where a co-producer is applicable whenever they find funding, talent, help source distribution, and any variation. So anyone who helps elevate the project for you in a meaningful way could be named a co-producer and would get also associated fees to that. Executive producer is probably the most confusing title, I always have to say, because it could be anything. Executive producer in most situations is someone who provides financing, but it's also been seen to be given to distributors. So network executives, streamer executives, studio executives have seen to be getting executive producer credits as well as financiers. So you need to think about the movie world as someone where the executive producer is driven by whatever relates to money, and distribution is a part of money and funding is a part of money. Now in the TV world is very different. The TV world, this credit has nothing to do with anything that relates to the film world, because here it could be a creator of a story, it could be a showrunner, it could be someone who is responsible to produce a television series. They are basically the highest credit in the television world, and they usually come from the creative side, or they are someone who is put on a project to see the physical production through. So an executive producer can also be someone who guides another producer in getting their project made, clearly helping packaging, sourcing funding or financing, sourcing distribution, managing agreements, and help manage the physical production or a combination of that. So this is a bendy credit, and it's also a credit you don't want to necessarily easily hand out. What you can hand out, I never say you should hand a credit out easily, you should never do that. But the co-executive producer credit is a credit that can be given to someone who, for example, in the film world or in the TV world, opens up the potential for casting, distribution, and financing, but it's not actually the financier. In the executive producer world, it's often the executive producer that is actually the financier or someone who works for a finance company. Someone who opens a door to an investor or to a funding or entity or a lender is usually associated as an executive, co-executive producer. In television, it's someone who is a co-creator, who works on the creative side with the executive producer, who has not the same rights than the executive producer would, but is pretty strong and close up there with them. A co-executive producer is also someone who guides a producer to help them get their project made. They are usually not as involved, but they give little pointers and say, go there, just some hints to help a producer go in the right direction. They help with funding, they help with agreements, distribution, but it's not as active. So an executive producer would say, I'm looking at this agreement, go to Lionsgate, let me see if I can open the door. I'm going to look at the agreement. Let's see what it says. Let's see how much money we can make. They're very active in comparison to the co-executive producer that says, yeah, I can call this guy at Lionsgate and you can go pitch and just tell him I said hi. That's kind of the difference in that scenario. Supervising producers are usually producers that oversee physical production, but it could also be someone who's hired by the bond company to oversee your production. So it's basically someone who's more related to the physical production side than a creative producer would be, or a creative component would be, like the producer is very much involved in the creativity, the executive producer is very much involved in finding the financing. A supervising producer is really more involved working with the line producer on the physical production in many cases. Line producer, you probably know, is someone who puts together a budget, a schedule, works very closely with the bond company and the production accountant, and manages the on budget production, the physical production of a film or a television show. Associate producer is a credit you can be, I don't want to say generous with, because you should never be generous with any credits, but it's a credit that has potential to just show that there is someone who helped in some way. Maybe they found a location for you that you don't have to pay as much for. Maybe they connected you to a casting director who ended up being amazingly helpful in casting your project. Maybe they did help you with getting a great production location, physical production place where you can make money, and they know maybe someone who is local and works in the tax incentive office to give you an advantage in working with them. So these are people that are giving you something that's beneficial, that could be in any range, could be anything related to the production, the development, the financing, the distribution, and the packaging. So this is a credit where it's just someone who is willing to do something. Now, it's often also the case that when you work with teams and crew members, there are certain crew members who would say to you, I'd love to get an associate producer credit, like a UPM sometimes would want that, or a line producer would say, I'd rather want to have a credit in a producing category than a line producing credit. Maybe they feel that this is a better credit for them. So some crew members and line item personnel might ask for that. You also have a situation, by the way, where managers and cast will ask for credits, and that could be anything from co-producer to co-executive producer to executive producer to producer to associate producer. So talent and managers ask for credits, and it really depends on the value that they provide to you, what credit you should give them, and what value that is, how much does it benefit your project, and how much further does it help you get the project made. The role of a creative producer is basically someone who is very focused on the development of a project and really thinking about, how does the story have to go? How do I work with the writer to get it right? What would be the ideal cast for this? What would be the ideal director for this? And how do we make this work? It's very much driven by someone who's really about the development and the creative side of the project. These kind of producers are not very often involved in financing or physical production. It's just someone who really makes sure that the creative vision of a project is also adhered to, not just while the project is put together, but also in pre-production and the production and the post-production phase. Any questions about any of this? Okay, let me see here. What do we have? Los Angeles only, Darren. Los Angeles only hands outside subsidies, 3 per year. Okay, Darren, what's that question? Help me out here. You send a question to everyone. I'm not hearing you. Are you mute?
Sorry about that. So
No
what I
worries.
was saying is, so in California, in order to get a tax credit, you can only apply 3 times a year. You have to do it within the tiny windows, and they don't give that many out. Is there any way to get around that? Is there any way to get any other type of tax subsidies in California besides what they hand out?
I don't think so, Darren. I'm very sorry. I was never able to really get my hands on this weird California credit because it's so convoluted. And even when you read it, is what does it even say? And
Right.
how much is it even? And what is even available? It's so confusing. It's the most confusing tax credit I've ever seen. I don't even know anyone who's ever used this, honestly.
Got it.
Maybe
Got it. And they only give out 6 projects a year, it seems like.
Yeah, no, I think you can forget that. I think there might as well not be any.
Right.
No.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah,
very much. I was
so
wondering
sorry
about
about that. Can't be any beneficial there.
Yeah.
This is why productions move to other cities. Yes, Christine, you're absolutely right. Now, I've thrown a lot of stuff at you tonight. Does anyone have any questions about this? No questions.
I do have a question. I know we spent a lot of time looking into financing a movie, but I just wanted to clarify that wouldn't apply the same way on TV, right? I feel
No, it
like
would.
TV.
It absolutely would, Christine. Many of the financing structures that we're learning here have to do with TV. Now, here's the difference with television a little bit. While you don't really specify and need the US market or a US buyer to be applicable and ready and signed on for a movie, you do need that for a television series in order to be able to put the TV series together using these foreign elements. If you do a television series, it's either in a way that you pitch it to a network or a streamer and they take it from you because they like the idea and then they pay for everything, or you do it in a way that's pretty much like a co-production where they buy the US rights, then you now know you have a TV show that's aired by ABC, they bought the US rights, and then you go out and do your pre-sales in the US based on the fact that ABC pre-bought it. That gives a certain value to buyers internationally, and they will then pre-buy these rights for you. An example that I've made early on, I believe, was the Dog Whisperer show and Baywatch. So you should maybe look at that again because it explains very interestingly, I should say, for lack of a better word, how the TV market is attacked when it comes to getting these projects together. The same will apply. The TV US market is going to have a larger financial contribution for you. So you can expect about generally on average between 35 to 65% of your budget coming just from the US. And then the rest you can do internationally. It really depends on how strong the US buyer feels your project is and how much money they'll give you. But you can get a significant amount from the US. And for TV series, it usually is what you need. You need a US partner in order to do anything in television. You don't need that in film, but you do need that in television. Is it beneficial in film? Yes, but it's very hard to do. That's why we don't really even go there. We try, trust me, everyone always tries to sell their movie with the studio first or get at least some kind of US going, but it is harder to do. With television, it's more normal. Not that it's not hard, but it is more the case where you would have the US attached in order to do all the other elements, the finance elements. And then when it comes to the financing, the difference that you would see is that the US portion is larger. So in our case, when we do these movies, we see the US portion coming in at anywhere between 25 and 50% of the budget, which is something that works in film. Sometimes it's more for film, but I'm talking about averages here. In television, it's usually much higher from the get-go. And many times again, they just you pitch them a project and they just buy it. They don't want to deal with you finding money somewhere else because they have their outlets in other countries, or like Netflix or Amazon, they have streaming services in other countries and they don't need you to go into foreign territories to, get money because they can do that themselves. And then they would basically pay for the entire production and then you don't have to do any financing. So that's basically a pickup deal. Yeah.
Jeanette, if we are putting together a TV project, do you want to do a preliminary budget when you're going into pitch, or if you're going to pitch into Netflix, it's going to change completely if they end up buying your project? But can it help or hinder you?
It depends on, honestly, if I say this and you don't repeat this, I change my budget
Sure.
depending on where I'm
Never.
going. Honestly, I change my budget depending on where I'm going. When I go pitch a show to, I don't know, like a history channel, right?
Yeah,
My budget is going to be slightly different than if I pitch it to Netflix. And
right.
you know, you have to kind of adjust it as to where you go there. But they're going to ask you, what do you think you're going to make this for? And they're going to ask you because they want to gauge kind of the quality level that you're going for. They want to kind of put it in a bucket, in a framework that makes sense to them. And if they are the ones paying for it, then in essence they are responsible for it. But they still they'll ask the question, and you have to have some kind of an answer. And everything is just an estimate anyway, this early in the stage. I mean, you don't know in many cases what your budget is going to be until basically you're in pre-production. I mean, my final budgets, when I had them before I started shooting, I was lucky. I was happy. I mean, I'm talking about the day before I started shooting, and that is already 6 weeks into pre-production. So it happens. You don't really know the final number, but you do have to do the exercise of gauging what you believe it could be and what framework you want to operate in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much. It does.
Of course. Anyone else?
I've heard that from a couple of other indie producers that I know. They do tailor the budget. I think it seems to be your entire pitch deck kind of changes a little bit depending on who you're pitching to, right?
Correct. I would say that's correct. Because when you know you're pitching to Netflix, let's say, you don't need to necessarily put in foreign sales estimates because they don't need that. They don't need to see that. For them, it's more about who is your show, who is your executive producer, who is your cast, who is your really it's about what's the story, what's the cast. They're very cast driven, and they're also director driven and story driven, of course. So when you know your target audience and you cater to that, because they're obviously driven by who's going to watch this, and if you have a strong package with a strong script, then you'll get in. But they don't care about your sales estimates. I mean, they don't care about your finance plan unless they say something like, how are you thinking of financing this? If they ask that question, it should be okay. You should have this prepared just in case they ask, and saying, well, if you're only taking domestic, here's the path I was thinking of taking. If you're taking the world, then obviously the path is up to your decision, is up to you to decide. It is good to go into a meeting knowing these things, but if you do a pitch deck, I don't think you need to put it in there for them. Versus if you go to another buyer or another investor or another exhibitor, or distributor, you want to have that information.
Is this a good day to ask about the elephant?
What elephant? Oh, the elephant in the room that you have to have the package before the money before the package?
No.
Oh.
No. The new elephant.
Which is that?
COVID.
It's always a good day to ask about COVID.
All right. So how much has COVID changed your financing and your production expectations?
Yeah. So here's what first happened. Remember that investment company that I talked about earlier, Daniel?
Yeah.
I started working with them in January. Can't imagine what happens. They literally told me, we're now going for distressed COVID assets. It sounds nasty.
Yeah.
What happened? I'm like, what do you mean distressed? Yeah. Here is why we are distressed COVID asset. Because we cannot shoot, and because we have to shoot in areas where we are allowed. At that time, Germany was still a possibility to shoot, and I had a whole series scheduled in Germany, so I had a sales pitch going to it and going to an arena where we could still shoot, which blew out the window just 3 months later.
Right.
But content is going to be a distressed asset simply because we couldn't do and produce any. There isn't any. I mean, a colleague of mine is shooting Lucifer, the series, right? They're in the last season, and they started with COVID they started shooting, I think 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, something like that. Everything was on hold until then. And when you go to their set, you see markings on the floor. You're like yellow markings, green markings, red markings, and that basically stops the people that have the wristband corresponding to the markets as to where they can go. So the closed markings going towards the talent, not even the director can be there. The producer is all the way back on in the trash compartment because there's no way we get to the set. So what they did is they structured it in a way where only the people that are necessary on set are going to be close to the actors, and then they really have lines. They have, I'm not kidding, there is markings on the floor as to how close you can be to each other and to whomever. So they figured out a way to shoot with a COVID specialist on set. And it's interesting because I should actually invite Tom to maybe guest speak about this because it's hilarious. He's the lead TP on Lucifer, and he told me this because I asked him, I said, what are you doing? You shooting? How are you shooting? How is this even happening? I was not able to ensure any of my productions, and he tells me he's shooting. I'm like, who's ensuring these productions? So they are insured based on them having a COVID specialist on set the entire time, them based on applying these regulations that really have to do with wearing masks, access to certain areas on set, who is allowed in, who is allowed out, and how you work with the actors and when the mask goes off, when the mask goes on. It's like a very strict kind of process. Problem is super expensive. I don't know any production that kind of, yes, Lucifer, of course, they can afford it. But when you have already to do a stringent budget, it's going to be difficult. So for me personally, I'm focusing right now on projects that are very team light, where we just have a few people on set and really don't need to move much. So it's really more about smaller projects that don't need to have 50 teams on set all the time. I think production is affected by this, having to have COVID specialists and COVID regulation applied, which increased the budget, not shooting enough. And also Lucifer, they had to shut down for 2 weeks because someone did get it and they had to basically stop and then restart it. And that happens. So there is a lot of delays that are occurring because of this. That's just what I'm seeing in talking to colleagues.
And that's production, to say nothing about the big question mark for theatrical distribution.
Oh, forget that.
Yeah.
I have to say that, oh my God, Robert Court, you all saw his interview, right? Robert Court had produced a movie, The Secret, and they had a deal for theatrical distribution. And as you know, it didn't go theatrically. It was premiered, I want to say Amazon, Netflix, somewhere, but it wasn't a theatrical distribution as far as I know. And they are devastated. It's what.
And what about the deals that the banks and whatever did based on pre-sale contracts that nobody can, execute, right? They're not going to be released. They're not going to cash flow. Those got to be dispersed.
Well, anyone who has a theatrical rights on a movie that is not being theatrically released is obviously in trouble. There is a lot of movies that had to be stopped. They don't, first of all, they're in trouble because they're not going to get shot. So that's already a reason why you're not going to get your pre-sale done, because you can't deliver them on time. You can't shoot the movie. So everything's on hold. But what I'm also seeing is that people are on hold. They're waiting to see when things can ramp up again. And they are slowly ramping up again. I actually see a silver lining in the sense that people are still at home watching. Content is still needed. So at some point, there's going to be a run after content, and there's going to not be enough there. So I think I see it as a little bit as an opportunity for producers who have good content and who have content that's affordable. Because the other thing that happens is people obviously have to budget accordingly due to the fact that they lost money, and they're going to look for lower budgeted movies that can be commercial. Maybe they don't have the A-level talent in it, but maybe they have a B-level, but that they're still available to be streamed on network stations or on streamers. I think theatrical movies, the way they work is literally only by premiering on platforms. And what they do now, and I'm sure you've seen this, when I want to watch a theatrical movie, is it on Amazon or wherever, it's like $16 and up. I don't think I've ever paid this much money for a movie on demand. I know I paid $6.99 sometimes, and maybe $5.99 or $4.99. The other day, I paid nearly $20 to watch a movie. So they're making money because I'm watching it from home. I'm
I'd
paying
pay
for-
30 to watch Tenet. That
Oh, really?
I would.
Milan is $29.99.
There you go. So what it seems like to me when I see these numbers is that a new finance model for replacing the box office is being developed. Now, the box office was always a loss leader for us, let's be honest, because even if we have great box office, you don't see it. I mean, it's eaten up by all the expenses. It's eaten up by the studio. I mean, hardly ever have I seen box office revenues from any of the movies that I made, and they all went into the theaters. So now that this box office revenue comes from a different source, box office revenue, so to speak, comes from the streamer and maybe the network, and they're charging an on-demand, and I agree to an on-demand premiere, and I do a deal like that, I actually have a chance of making money with this because the expense component isn't there. So if I have a strong movie that people pay $29 for to watch, that's amazing. Obviously, you have to do a deal that's accordingly, but it is actually creating revenue where there wasn't revenue before. So,
You know, it might be like one of those companies where the top line revenue is down, is off, but the bottom line cash flow is up because of all the expense savings.
yeah, no, I think in general, I would say, to answer the white elephant question, I think it was a huge disruption for everyone in every industry on the planet. And I don't think there isn't one that, I mean, I can't think of one that was not affected. So we all are affected, but it also is an opportunity because we're all rethinking. We are rethinking revenue models. And the fact remains, content is needed. It's a little bit like toilet paper, excuse my French. You do need it. It's what we do. We watch movies, we watch content. It doesn't matter if it's on our little phone or if it's on the big screen in our living room and not in the theaters, but we all are consumers.
So last Friday and Saturday, I promised myself I'd catch up in this class.
Right.
And then I discovered Apple TV's For All Mankind, and I binged watched all 10 episodes. It's really
good. I need to get on there.
It's outstanding. Here's the premise, and I think the people listening might find it interesting. What if NASA integrated women into the program in the 60s instead of waiting to the 90s? What would the world be like?
Okay.
And it was spurred on by the fact that the Russians sent, in 1963, they sent a woman up into space. So the premise is NASA responds to that. It's a really interesting alternate universe type of
That
thing.
sounds great. No,
Yeah.
that's definitely something.
Yeah.
So there are people, I mean, you see shows on TV where people are wearing masks. I mean, stuff is being produced, but it is being produced in a very safe, regulated environment. And I think it's not as, I think there's not as much content being produced as it usually is, which I believe.
I have a question, Jeanette.
Yeah.
Well, I have two questions actually. Post coronavirus, as far as production insurance goes, are you seeing more of projects not being insured or projects being insured, but the rates going really high?
First, I saw projects not being insured. It was impossible to insure anything. That's the first.
So they're just not insuring them at all?
Well, they're not shooting.
They're not shooting at all.
You can't. I mean, no one wants to take the risk. I mean, unless you're insane. But no one really wants, at least not at the studio level or not at serious production houses will not take the risk of shooting without being insured.
But
Then
you can't get your bond unless you're insured, right?
exactly. So that's
Can't get your bank loan.
can't get a bank loan, you can't get money. So insurance is key to everything.
Do you see financial advisors pulling out of arrangements they'd already made?
Oh,
I mean, everyone pulls out of everything. They did. That's why that's the whole problem with COVID, that people were distressed and they didn't know what to do, and everything stopped and everyone pulled because there wasn't, you couldn't do anything. But now insurance companies are coming back and they are insurance productions, but
They are coming back to the table a little bit.
They are there already. They are there already. No, it's already happened. But the rules are slightly different. You have to have COVID regulations applicable on set. and you pay probably a little bit more depending on what kind of production you are in insurance premium. But they're really
My other,
mostly,
oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, my other question, more of a curious question from the team at Lucifer. How are they dealing with the actors who have to be in close proximity to each other while they're rolling? They can't be wearing masks while they're shooting. How are they dealing with that with the talent on screen?
They're tested every day, and they are wearing masks the entire time, and only when they have a scene in close proximity is when they take the mask off. But they're all tested. They're all positive.
Until they start rolling.
Yes.
But Jeanette, can I just say, because we've had so many people on set and we've had so many problems, that the testing is usually only 60% accurate. So we have false
Ooh.
positives all the time.
I know that is an issue, but in order to appease the insurance company.
I agree. Yeah, but it's been
We're
bad.
talking about what do they do, and that's what he told me that they do. They test everyone. And
So you're seeing a lot of false positives? That must be scary. People think they have it and it's wrong.
I
Yes.
think the risk is more that it is a false negative. You know, what if someone is positive who tested negative? That's
No, it's actually been more false positives. People are testing positive. They clear everybody from set. Then they wait and they bring that false positive person back and then they test them again and they're negative.
Oh, see, that I have not seen. I think the tests are very developed over the last few months. I think they're getting better. I mean, I know that they're doing it because I talked to Tom about this. Funny enough, they're doing this on that set, so they're testing all the time. I'm guessing they're getting a little better, because in the end of the day, it's all about, yes, of course, people need to stay healthy, but it is about making something happen, and you can only make it happen if you get it insured. And if you get it insured, you need to follow the rules of the insurance company. And if they dictate this test that is only 60% accurate, oh, well, then there's a. But you have to just do what they tell you to do. I mean, there isn't any way around this.
I'm curious, one more curious question about
Yeah.
on set. Are they requiring N95 grade masks or KN95 grade masks, or are they allowing cloth masks as well?
Oh, they have special masks. You have to have 95s.
They have 95s.
Yes, they do. You have to, especially, I mean, first of all, they're solving the problem. They also have the shields on, you know. They're solving the problem by not even letting you close to the set. I mean, if you go on the set, you see there's barely anyone there. It is close to proximity to the actors, nearly no one.
Oh yeah, I know. I know somebody who lives right next to Warner's. So
Yeah. Do we have any updates on any of your group projects or any questions about that? Is anyone on that works on anything that I can answer?
I was going to ask about that too. I got one message and then I haven't seen anything. I don't know if I'm just missing it because I don't know how to use the platform or what.
Are you in group 2 or group 1?
Group.
If you don't know, then you're in group 1. Group 2, we had a brief meeting last Saturday, but only 2 of us showed up because it was right after we found out about the election. So we've kind of formulated a plan. It's just trying to get everybody else on board with us.
Well, we have representatives. I think our session here has 3 different courses, people from 3 different courses. I mean, I have no idea who is what, but people from 3 different courses here. So there is 6 projects that would be applicable. So there is 3 group 1s and 3 group 2s, so to speak.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah, just FYI.
Oh, so there's 6 groups.
Yeah,
I
there's
didn't understand that.
I'm teaching right now 3 classes parallel, but I'm putting you all together in the video session, because I get more feedback, and you know, it is more interesting to have everyone there at once, because it's the same thing for everyone.
Jeanette, can you delineate who's in what group? Do you by any chance have all those names?
Who is in what group? So Natalie, I'm going to look in what group you are, and I'm going to contact the group leader to find out what's going on, if you want me to do that.
Okay, I've never used this platform before, so I've been finding things that I didn't know were there from both of my classes. And I have like 4 or 5 sections of group project, and they're all labeled group project. So I don't know which one goes with this class. Because I have 5 groups labeled group project.
Oh, because you're taking different courses on Canvas.
Yeah, but they're not labeled with the name of the course. All it just says is group project. It doesn't have the name of the class, so I don't know what's what.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah, that I only see the platform from my end. So I see my free courses, but I don't see what you see when you take other courses. So that's something that I don't know. I think you should just go in there and see what's what. Just check it out, see if you miss anything.
I click on them, I open them, and then I look at the people that's in the group, and the instructor that's named in the group will tell me what class it's for. But I have to go through like 5 different levels to find that. It's crazy.
I'm going to look at where you're at, and I'm going to tell you who you need to talk to, and just because then you have a name and an email, and then at least you know. I'm going to connect you with them through email. I don't know by heart, honestly. I have to look it up, but I'll look it up and then I'll let you know. So give me like 15 minutes. Any other updates? Any other questions?
I do have a question. It says that I'm on group 2, but I never got anything about meeting. But I think Darren said.
Well, I think now that we know that there are 3 different group 2s, that could be the reasoning. So
it is. Let me just like write down here. So I'm going to write down. So it's Christine and Natalie. Yes, I'm going to check out what group you're in, and then I will connect you with your group leaders.
yeah, I hope you're in our group.
Yeah, anyone else doesn't know what group they're in? Or, I mean, by the way, you don't have to do this in a group. You can do it yourself, or you cannot do it at all because you have other beautiful things to do. It's not a mandatory thing. I was just offering it because people sometimes like to work on these business plans with other people together.
Jeanette,
Yeah.
if we're in a group where the other classmates are not opting to participate in it, could I possibly move over to a group that is? I've actually done pitch decks before, so
yeah. Well, then they benefit from your expertise.
It would be fun to do another one if
I can see who it is, and then I can I'll give you the option to move into the other group, because if you
Send her our way. We'd love that.
yes, right. Let me see.
Yeah, I would totally be
so
down to help you guys if you want.
Here.
So look for the one I'm Darren if you want to switch.
Darren, okay.
I will look if you're even in the same course, because if you're not in the same course, I don't think that works.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, okay. You know what, Natalie? Here's the thing. You can go to Darren, because I don't care what course you do this group project with. So if you want to go into Darren's group, Darren, you just have to let her know your email address and how you meet each other, and then Natalie, you just go. You're gonna have to connect through email though, because
That's easier for me, honestly, because this UCLA platform has got me really confused. But if you want to just give me your email, Darren, I can totally I can just write you an email off the site
right now. And I'm not the team leader, so
whoever wants to join Darren, you're going to be the mother of them all.
no, I'm actually not the team leader though, but we'd love anybody who wants to be involved.
Okay, great.
Yeah, can I do the same? Because I'm not hearing anything from my group.
Join Darren, and then if that's okay with you guys, then you have 2 more people joining you. It's all good.
And I'm trying to, oh, there we go.
Okay, please, yes, that's correct. All right, any other questions, boys and girls?
No, just have a safe flight.
Yeah, so I'm flying to Maui tomorrow because my birthday is on Sunday. So
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Quite a while. So the next time we go online, I'm going to be broadcasting from the island of Maui.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I think the next one we're doing the final. Is it the final already? Let me see here. Final, prep for final. So we'll talk about the final next time. And then, by the way, what I usually do the final together with everyone. So you don't actually have to do it if you don't want to do it on your own. You can do it on your own, but you can also do it in a session together. So I leave it up to you. Just keep that in mind.
Is it the same format as the midterm?
It's the same format as the midterm. It's just a little, I think it's a few more questions. I don't know if it's it's the same format. You're gonna just go through the modules, answer questions. Some are multiple choice. And then I think you have one case study with a theatrically released film. And that's it. It's not that difficult. I'm trying to keep these. I mean, you guys all did so well on the midterm. I'm not worried at all. But some people like to kind of do this together. So I always give people the option. If you want to do the final together with everyone, we can do that. That would be in the last session. I don't think it's the next one. I think it's the one after the next one. I have to check actually my calendar. Okay, are we good? Yeah, no more questions?
Have a good trip.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Thank you. I see you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy. Thanks, Jeanette. Thanks,
See you.
everybody.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.